with the doctors' unions and another with the nurses to see if we can resolve this stalemate today. Yesterday, the Cabinet Secretary for Health expressed optimism that the impasse would be resolved today. We will have to wait and see. Caroline B. joining us there as she's on the beat on this top story in the country today. Now, let's move to another story. Chief Justice David Maraga will soon publish strict regulations for both the High Court and Magistrates' Courts that preside over anti-corruption cases. Maraga says they are to ensure the speedy hearing and conclusion of economic crimes cases. He said he was in the final stages of reorganizing that to implement the same. Part of the rules demand that corruption cases be heard within 2 days of suspects being charged without room for adjournment. Let's talk to Felix Odhiambo, who's an advocate with me today. Felix, thanks for joining us.
Most welcome, and thanks for having me here, Yvonne.
Thank you. So let's talk about this issue. Some say, for a start, that the CJ could be interfering with judicial discretion. Do you agree or disagree?
First of all, I think I would admit I understand where the CJ is coming from. The issue of backlog of cases, whether it's criminal or civil divisions of the court, it's just horrendous. But having said that, I must agree that to some extent, you know, whatever rules that the CJ wants to gazette are administrative in nature. Courts, when they sit, they have what is called decisional independence. And the CJ cannot gazette rules that, to some extent, will be infringing on the decisional independence of courts, because to a great extent that will be interfering with the very core tenet of independence of judges and magistrates.
But the CJ is the administrative head of the judiciary, if you like. So isn't it within his purview to start to say, these cases are taking a long time, can we find a quicker way to resolve them?
That is not in dispute. His headship of the judiciary is not in dispute. But when a judge or magistrate sits to preside over a case, the judge or magistrate constitutes the judiciary, the court rather. And to that extent, they have the discretion based on the circumstances of each case to determine how the case proceeds. For instance, when they sit, there are issues that will arise that the rules did not contemplate. And in that case, the rules cannot stop them from having the right under the law to adjourn cases if and when need arises.
All right, you started off the conversation, and I think the country agrees that cases take, quite a bit of time within the judiciary. So if you're saying this might be possibly interfering with judicial discretion of the judge at the time to enable him or her reach the right decision, so what's the alternative, if not these regulations that the CJ is proposing?
A number of things. First of all, let's put this discussion into context and perspective. What is it that really creates the so-called backlog in courts? A number of things come to mind. One is understaffing in the judiciary, all right? Two is also understaffing outside the judiciary, but within the framework of the criminal justice system. Because
How
this
do you
one,
mean? Yeah.
We are talking of the criminal justice system.
Right.
The courts don't deal with matters exclusively. There are so many other stakeholders and players in the criminal justice system.
Such as?
You have the prisons, the remand homes, you have the police, you have, let's say, the EACC in this context, you have the CID. So all these, whatever rules that the CJ will gazette, as the administrative head of the judiciary, they will only be binding on the judiciary.
Yes.
All right?
But isn't that fair then to say, I mean, surely he does not have jurisdiction over those other areas that you've mentioned, over the police, for example, or over the EACC. So shouldn't we then be saying that the CJ can do what he can under his area of jurisdiction, and then urge the EACC, the police, the CID, the prisons, the reform system, to play their parts individually?
No, really, the point is this. Why make them if they may not make sense at the end of the day? Reason
Why
is
not
this.
push for the other institutions to do the same?
But he can't. It doesn't have that jurisdiction.
I mean, but should we then have a concerted effort to say, if the CJ is doing this within the judiciary, then we're urging the police to be able to do the same, across the chain?
No, sometimes adjournments arise out of reasons, extraneous reasons. For instance, lack of an expert witness, all right? So you cannot stop a judge or magistrate from adjourning a case simply because the rules gazetted by the CJ prohibit, or rather
Okay.
do not contemplate adjournment.
So what's the solution?
All
Because
right.
you're talking about the problem, which is the whole area.
Which takes me back to what I was saying. What really causes adjournment? One, rather backlog. One is corruption,
Okay.
both within and outside courts. Two is understaffing, both within and outside courts. Three is lack of capacity, all right, both within the courts and within other criminal justice system. You also have the role of other players, for instance, like advocates. To a great extent, part of the reason or part of the problem of backlog has been attributed to advocates who will always have one reason or another as to why the case must adjourn.
Yeah.
And you know, based on
that famous statement that they're achieving fame because of their ability to manipulate and frustrate the system, that the longer it goes on, the better for the advocate that's handling the cases?
Yes, to some
Are you
extent.
admitting complicity of some advocates, some lawyers?
You cannot exclude advocates as critical stakeholders in the judicial system. Some of them, just like anytime you have a group of people, you will definitely not miss bad apples.
Okay.
But the fact is, some of them, or some of us rather, have a role in creating the backlog.
Right.
And then you also have challenges of funding for the judiciary, for instance, because for them to employ, because part of the reason of backlog is lack of adequate judicial offices. You need adequate financing to employ human resource and also to enhance the infrastructure of the courts across the country. So all these will have contributed to a great extent in the issue of backlog as we have it today. So we need to develop what is called a holistic process, a holistic way in which to deal with this. If the problem is understaffing, how do we deal with that? Increase the HR capacity of courts and other criminal justice, especially the police, for instance, the CID.
Yeah.
Economic crimes, for instance, will require a lot of forensic evidence.
Right.
Forensic evidence, we don't have a forensic laboratory, you know, under Anglo-leasing paid to our efforts.
Okay, Felix, let me put this to you, because a lot of what you're saying is definitely possible. But some may say lofty at this point. We have not had a forensics laboratory. We tried that. We got into a scandal with Anglo-leasing. You know, funding for the judiciary is something that would have to wait for the next budget. So are we saying that the CJ can do nothing because there are all of these bigger problems? So my question to you is, what else can the CJ do? If not these proposed strict regulations on saying all these cases must take 2 days in court or 3 days or whatever. Besides all of those issues, because a number of those you've mentioned, budgets, that has to come in the next financial year, that has to go through Parliament. A forensics laboratory, again, that is funding. So are we then saying the CJ is helpless? What can he do?
Not really. One, apart from proposing those strict rules, which I don't think are practical, given the way courts operate.
What would be practical for the CJ to propose?
Let me give you answer that question by giving you an example.
Okay.
Prior to 2010, the civil cases, the rules that govern civil cases were repealed by what is called the Civil Procedure Rules 2010. Civil Procedure Rules 2010 created or rather require, as we speak, that once the hearing of cases begin, they're supposed to continue on a day-to-day basis, all right, without adjournment.
Okay.
But that has not worked. No case proceeds on a day-to-day basis.
So rather than saying 2 days, it was just made that every day there should be hearing of the case. Was that the idea? So rather than saying 2 days, you just have it back to back to back to back.
Because ask yourself, what happens in the event that the cases are not heard within 2 days, 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
Where would that lead that trial? could it be said that there is a mistrial if it overshoots the 4 days?
Right.
All right.
So I'm hearing your example, which is one where you say was not practical. I'm
Yes.
still not hearing what would be practical, but just hold that thought. I want us to listen to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission that have decried this very crisis when it comes to the war on corruption within the judiciary. Let's listen to this.
And I feel so sad that somebody can say ESCC are not working hard. She goes, if you see Mariah's office or TOR, they have volumes. You know, cases that go to court, one volume of the investigation is almost 5-6 files. And between now and next month, we are pressurizing Mariah's office to send 124 cases to DPP. I don't know how he's going to do it, but we told them we want to see those cases going to DPP. And you know, the role of DPP is to prosecute the people. We and the CIDs, we send the files. Then after the files go to DPP, he sends the people to court. And then the courts have their role to play. So Mr. Mariah, I would beg you, as you continue with this workshop, make the people understand each role. Every agency has a role to play. When Halake has sent files to DPP, he doesn't go there to make any more decisions. The files have to be handled by DPP, and when the files go to court, all what Mariah does and Regina, my able lawyers, and many others, is to go to court to defend the cases.
Right, the frustration there with these cases of corruption. Surely this is a big conversation we're not running away from. Felix Odhiambo, an advocate. So, your reaction, first of all, to that before we conclude our discussion.
One, what the lady seems to be alluding to is the fact of lack of sort of a coordinated system of working within the government. And to a great extent, it has been, most people have said that there is sabotage within some quarters.
Right.
And really, that is an administrative issue that the powers that be need to address. It should be a bit of lobbying. It should be a bit of But there was a task force, remember, that was created by the president, taking a look at, you know, and picked people from the Aegis Office, DPP, the EACC, the judiciary, to just bring everybody together. And we're still having, you know, coordination problems. You see, a task force...
It seems like we can't win.
a task force, as long as there is no legal framework within which to implement the decisions, or rather the recommendations that they make, then those recommendations just remain recommendations. Because remember, each of these institutions that are involved in the criminal justice system, even the fight against corruption, they are creatures of statutes, right? So as long as those statutes are not amended to accord with the recommendations that we are talking about, then we are actually just going round and round and round. We must, and there must also be the goodwill. Goodwill from political quarters, all right? Goodwill from the police. You know, police are a very critical ingredient in the criminal justice system. So if there's no goodwill from their part, so that they do not properly investigate cases, then we are going nowhere. Even if we had the hearing scheduled for 1 day. Right. It is not just about taking people to court.
So let me ask you this. We keep hearing of this goodwill word, political goodwill, amongst the police. But that's really a matter of discretion, if you like, for a human being. You know, I may or may not want to do my job, but is there a way we can, and this is... institutionalize or, you know, put in place, I mean, shouldn't the laws be able to work, whether it's goodwill or not? For example, if I don't do my job, you know, no goodwill or not about it, if you don't do your job, then there's consequences. Because we keep depending on goodwill by the politicians, we keep depending on goodwill from the police. And this goodwill is such an abstract, you know, notion. Are we just being...
For us to talk about goodwill here, it means it is not there. Because I believe, to a great extent... And how do we put
goodwill there?
To a great extent, Yvonne, as we speak now, our laws have created institutions and anchored them sufficiently in a manner that if all factors are held constant, they should be able to
So
work.
that regardless of goodwill, there's a job
They
to be
should
done.
be
They should be working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but if the person, these institutions will only be as good as the people who
So where do we
work
get
in
these
them.
people, Felix?
All right?
We've been
No.
fighting corruption in this
No.
country for a long time.
No, the point is,
with goodwill from heaven.
These institutions will all remain as good
Yeah.
to the extent that the people who are in charge of the institutions want to do their jobs right.
I see. Okay.
Right.
So let's conclude then. I was just taking a flight of fancy with this goodwill business because sometimes it just seems a little too abstract, to sort of put a finger on. Okay. So fast tracking the cases at the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? Is there a silver bullet? What is that thing? If not these regulations, then what?
It is good that the CJ acknowledges the problem that there is.
Okay.
That's one, and he's doing something. The only thing is, the only tragedy is that he will realize sooner than later that those regulations may not really be the ultimate solution. But change can be incremental. We can build on that and hope that the other institutions are able to discharge their duties effectively as enshrined within the Constitution and other statutes.
All right, so what you're saying is it's not just within the judiciary itself, but throughout the criminal justice system.
We
There
must
be a concerted
examine
effort.
our performance.
Right.
The judiciary must examine its performance and its deliverables based not how it examines itself internally, but also how it examines other stakeholders externally who are involved in the process.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for your time and your insights today. Felix Odhiambo, who's an advocate of the High Court, we thank you for making the time to be with us as we see how to fight this war on corruption from all levels. Stay with me, Felix, as we take a break right here on News Center. We'll be right back.